Hi, my name is Hannah Thomas. I'm a semi-abstract painter. I work currently at least, out of my studio in Bradford and Avon in Wiltshire in the UK. And I paint sort of large, bold works based on ideas of absurdism and personal freedom. I was formerly a music photographer, living and working in London, but I changed to painting about 5 years ago. My background. I'm entirely self-taught in painting. I went to the University of the West of England in Bristol to do an arts degree, but that was with a photography element, so I was merely doing photographic and sort of mixed media work with photos there. And after that, after graduation and killing a few years here and there, I moved to London and pursued a career as a professional photographer, mainly specialising in the music industry. I did 10 years in East London doing that, shooting several gigs a week, working as part of festival, film crews, portrait sessions, stills on film and video sets, that sort of thing. And then I kind of hit a transitional point in my life, personally and professionally, and I moved out of London and out of the professional photography circuit, basically. A few years later, after some sort of creative restlessness and turbulent romance, I found myself back in the studio with some paint, and that was it really. Just started working with that really, and it's all stemmed from there. More than I realised until recently. It's interesting to see how much some of my work is infused with sort of my relationship with sort of rock music, and a sense of being outside the accepted conventions kind of implicit in my choice of career. By that I mean that, my art is not a soapbox. I don't attempt to hang social or political issues on it, and I don't like myself or my work to be shoved into sort of lazy categories or interpretations. I wasn't taking the usual kind of photographs when I was a music photographer either, and I wasn't prepared to compromise to sell more, and that still applies now to my painting. There's more freedom in painting, but nonetheless there is a disappointing amount of convention in the industry still, even in those kind of galleries and institutions that claim to be doing something radical. It's also, having been a photographer in the past, I still do it on a personal level, but having done so much photography in the past, it had a lot to do with the way I approached painting, in as much as I wanted painting to be a sort of entirely different experience. I don't have a lot of interest anyway in traditional painting, landscapes and figurative painting, figurative perhaps particularly. I feel like the human figure, nude or otherwise, has been done to death, and I had no interest in kind of going down that road. Plus I'm self-taught, so you tend to be slightly wary of going straight into sort of traditional areas. But my main interest was, as a painter, was to, go the other way, to be painting what can't be seen, to be painting from you're in sort of internally. So yeah, for sure, having been a photographer, what I chose to then go on to paint was definitely a reaction to that, and definitely had a lot to do with my creative decisions in the studio. It still does, really. My biggest influences are Francis Bacon, obviously, H.R. Geiger, specifically his Alien. I like a lot of Basquiat stuff, David Lynch movies for sure. sort of Scandinavian metal for the sort of theatrics, and quite a lot of sort of literature, really. Things like Colin Wilson's Outsider, Camus' The Rebel, The Dice Man, bits and pieces of philosophy. It's not sort of fueled specifically by one main sort of thing, but they generally are all combining in the work somehow to create a certain atmosphere or guide the palette, in some way or another. And also the motifs, obviously, like the kind of mouths, disembodied mouths, that sort of thing. I'm focusing right now on my latest series of paintings, which is quite transitional. My style's been kind of really growing and defining itself in the paintings I've done over the past year. And now it's becoming sort of much stronger and more bold. I'm working quite large as I'm much more comfortable in front of a big surface, where painting is kind of a physical act. And it makes it much easier to experiment, I think. I'm just following my instincts on these, really, honing my technique, but at the same time trying not to get locked in by it, because it's very easy to find that you're sort of either blindly repeating yourself, or that you feel like you can't do certain things because you've got your technique, and straying outside of it feels like possibly a bit risky. But I'm probably too early in my career at the moment to be that concerned about that. As long as my paintings all fit together within the series, I'm quite happy to sort of painting to painting sort of try different things here and there. Biggest challenge of being an artist? Well, a couple of things I'd say. When I was younger, I'd have said it was because I wasn't really sure what being an artist meant. When I was a teenager, I was always writing sort of stream of consciousness stuff, very romantic and melancholy, and I found photography then, and it helped to kind of draw me out and put me back in the world, out of my head, and in contact with people and the environment around me. So that was really wonderful for that. But now I've kind of come full circle slightly, where I'm back in my studio, alone and absorbed in the painting. So I've struggled with creative direction kind of at various points in the past, but I always knew I was an artist right from my teens. The journey here was just a little bit meandering, I suppose. It really has more to do, for me, with a mindset and a kind of emotional condition, in that I was always very consistent. So I'd say finding your outlet and being brave enough to go with it in the face of skepticism, quite often from the people around you. So, friends and family, with the best of intentions, but, you need to kind of ignore all their doubts. Secondly, though, I'd have to say now that the biggest challenge of being an artist is earning a living at it, which is very boring, but it's totally true. And especially when you've kind of thrown in everything you've got to go full time at it, which I have, but your earnings haven't really caught up yet. That's pretty scary, especially at this point in my life. I'm not 21 anymore, and it's like being in kind of free fall every day, waiting for a shift in gears, that's you hope is coming, But it's all good. It's all good, and far preferable to slaving away in a office environment to earn a crust. Advice to a younger self. I never know what to say to these questions, because really probably none. For a start, I've never really heeded advice. And also, I may not have lived exactly as I would like, but I did what felt right at the time, and any other advice would have fallen on deaf ears. It's another world, isn't it? Being young. everything I know about myself, I had to learn by living it. So I suppose I would simply like to have been a bit easier on myself and more relaxed about taking risks. I took risks, but I was unnecessarily all or nothing about a lot of things. Probably misguidedly romantic, and also had very high standards for myself, which, didn't always result in marvellous achievements, but quite often resulted in a sort of deer in the headlights panic, which was not always very productive. Unconventional mediums or techniques. As far as painting goes, I'm pretty simple. It's nearly all sort of heavy body acrylic with a bit of charcoal and ink, lots of black gesso. When I first started moving from photography to paint, I did a series called Rebel Visions, which were like little paintworks. I think initially, at least, they were done on sort of exposed photographic paper that otherwise would have gone in the bin. And I did little paintworks on them and then scanned them at very high resolution. They became these kind of amazing little worlds of texture and potentially could be enormous prints. And I'm still very proud of those, although they are a little overwhelming visually. But I came up with that myself just by experimenting in my studio in the early days, along with other techniques like kind of macro photography of ink and paint in water, etc. Do I listen to music? Yeah, I never have silence. I always have music. I've got like select playlists. Certain music is particularly conducive, I find, but it's quite wide-ranging. My standards kind of go-tos are Tricky's Nearly God album and Maxine K quite often. Sometimes Miles Davis or Charlie Mingus. One of my heavy playlists, hard rock and Scandinavian metal. Also, film soundtracks are great for a kind of sustained mood when you're feeling your way through early work and need a lot of time standing back and thinking about where the painting's going. Soundtracks are great for that because it's a whole album's worth of a particular mood. So I love Vangelis's Blade Runner soundtrack, Neil Young's soundtrack for Dead Man, Stuart Copeland's Rumblefish soundtrack are all great, and also lots of classical, of course. Can't beat a bit of Beethoven first thing with a cup of coffee. Best reaction. I recently did the Other Art Fair in East London back in October. It was one of my first kind of face-to-face with the public experiences with a few of my most recent works. My work's pretty out of place at these art fairs, so it's not easy work. It's big, it's not impulse purchase stuff, it's not decorative or easy to hang, and it's a bit weird. So I was really doing it for the experience of having to talk about my work to kind of anyone and everyone, as I had no experience of doing that before. But it was great fun. A lot of people did walk by, kind of cast an eye at my work, wrinkle their brows and move along quickly. But equally, I got really good dialogue from people who were actually genuinely interested, that stopped and looked for a long time and then approached me to ask about my process and my ideas, and it was really great. I could see some of them were like really wide-eyed and knocked out by the work, and you can't put a price on that for raising one's confidence, really. What do you hope people take away from your artwork? Some sense of recognition, maybe. The work draws on my own references and aesthetic tastes, but they're drawn from kind of fairly widely known sources. A sense of the absurd and the surreal, but fundamentally human. The shapes are kind of bimorphic or zoomorphic forms. Sense of kind of flesh and claustrophobia and confinement, being overwhelmed by activity, These are things that contribute to the kind of existentialist dilemma that fuels all my work, I'm not overtly political. I don't like to use my art as a political placard. It's attempting to reach someone on a much more basic level in their kind of visual and emotional DNA, without all the kind of distracting cultural zeitgeists. They don't last or stay the same, but the fight and the desire for kind of personal autonomy and freedom of movement and thought and space to grow, those are constants for everybody.